Standing tall for marriage at the nation's largest gathering of conservatives. This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard. Tom Minery and I, along with several of our colleagues, spent last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the nation's capital at the Conservative Political Action Conference. It's the largest gathering of conservatives each year. A record of more than 11,000 people attended, and CitizenLink is one of the sponsors. On the big stage, in the main hall, in smaller panel discussions, in radio interviews, and in private conversations along the way, we shared what it means to be pro-life and what it means to stand for marriage and religious freedom. Now, we usually try to keep these videos to around 10 minutes or so, but I wanted to do something special this week and give you the opportunity to see in its entirety the highest profile presentation that we got to give at the event. It was a panel on marriage. It was in the big hall. It was well attended, and you'll hear Michael Faulkner, our Tom Minery, of course, and Bishop Harry Jackson, who really got the crowd cheering. And the moderator is Carrie Lucas.
Well, thank you all so much for being here and for sticking around for this panel, and I'm just thrilled that we're here for a discussion about the role of marriage in society. I know a lot of what's been talked about in the conservative movement right now, and certainly a focus here at CPAC, has been the need to cut the size of government. And that discussion, or this discussion, far from a break from that theme, I think is a critical element to it. Because while conservatives need to fight the relentless push for cradle-to-grave care by the government, we also need to think about fighting it from the other sector, and that's by bolstering the civil society. And that starts with encouraging people to get and stay married and to make sure that more children are raised in the confines of a two-parent home. So I'm really excited. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. First, we're going to have Reverend Michael Faulkner. Reverend Faulkner is a DC native and a former football star, but his true calling has been serving as a pastor, reaching out to the poor and disadvantaged and building leadership skills among other pastors. He's worked as an advisor to many governments, and yes, please, thank you. And in 2005, he started the Institute for Leadership, a nonprofit focused on the development of leaders and leadership programs, and he's the author of the book, Restoring the American Dream. And next, great, thank you. Next, we're going to have Tom Minery. He is coming out right now, and he is the Senior Vice President of Focus on the Family. He has led the Government and Public Policy Division since 1988, serving as a steady voice articulating the conservative Christian viewpoints on family, marriage, and religious civil liberties. Tom also oversees the network of 38 state-level family policy councils, and he is the author of the book, Why You Can't Stay Silent. Finally, Bishop Jackson, who is going to come on out, is the senior pastor of Hope Christian Church in Washington, D.C. area with over 3,000 attendees, and he serves as a regional bishop in the Fellowship of International Churches. He's authored several books, and he earned a Bachelor of Arts a Bachelor of Arts from prestigious Williams College and a Master's of Business Administration from Harvard Business School. And he is the author of The Truth in Black and White. So I'm going to go ahead and let our first speaker come up, Reverend Michael Faulkner. We're going to try to get time for your questions. So thank you so much for standing by.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you for caring about marriage. It is so important. I'm very thrilled to be here, excited to be here. I was at my first CPAC conference in 1986, in which the keynote speaker was then President Ronald Reagan. And I was first introduced to conservative principles. I was working with the moral majority, and it has been an uphill battle ever since. I can assure you, being a conservative in Harlem is no small task, but we stand strong and we stand tough, and it is not a very difficult fight when you realize that the people that you're talking to, the people that we're representing, as it were, really agree with our principles. We have come to a fork in the road, and Yogi Berra said, when you come to the fork in the road, you take it. The fork in the road is our liberties, and the liberties that we celebrate that have made this nation great are now beginning to destroy us as a nation. John Adams said, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts itself, and murders itself. There is never a democracy that did not commit suicide. Now, we don't have a democracy, we have a republic-type democracy, but we are beginning to destroy ourselves. The issue of traditional marriage must be an issue that we, the people, decide upon, and that we, the people, can rule as or can express our opinions and not let them be sidetracked by judges or by special interests. It is important because traditional marriage is a cornerstone for our society. We have come to the place where we have got to bring moral reason back to this debate. We have got to bring moral reason back to this equation. There are some very stubborn facts that bracket the issue of traditional marriage, and they are that mothers and fathers that don't stay married, the children of families that don't stay married to a mother and a father, bad things happen. Statistically speaking, the likelihood of accidental death, of incarceration, of school dropout and failure goes up astronomically when the nuclear family is destroyed. Children suffer, and the whole community will pay the cost. I was a chaplain for the juvenile detention system in New York State, and I can assure you, most of the children, 99% of the children that I counseled and dealt with were from children whose family structures were destroyed or non-existent. The issue of traditional marriage, when you erode traditional marriage and remove that from the public square, what you do is erode the nuclear family. We cannot have that. We must stand for traditional marriage, but on the grounds that it is good for our society, on the grounds that our society has been built. Our marriage principles existed long before America did. This was the idea of a covenant between God, one man and one woman, existed long before America actually existed before the church did. And so we have to understand that there are some things that are true, whether you believe them or not, and there are some principles that we cannot allow to be eroded by popular opinion or by someone else's free choice or by the idea of being politically correct. We need to stand for traditional marriage, but not to stand against anyone else, but to stand for our society, to stand for our culture, to stand for our nation, to stand for the children and the families in our nation. If we do not, we will indeed destroy ourselves. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Faulkner. I'm kind of wondering why you're the only one over there on the right. All the rest of us are on the left. And I see my name card is on the right as well. So I'm going to join you when I'm done and get where I belong. Well, my task is very brief, but very significant because I want to put some numbers behind the very fine statements that Reverend Faulkner made about the decline of marriage and what it means in fighting poverty. We have a lot of reporters call us at Focus on the Family and CitizenLink, and they say to us, how come you don't fight poverty? Our answer to that is we believe we fight poverty every day in the most effective way that poverty can be fought in this country, and that is by keeping families intact. That is how we spend 90% of our time at Focus on the Family. So let's begin. Incidentally, if I don't get through all these slides, they will be on CitizenLink.com. That graph is all you need to see. That graph shows that when President Johnson in 1964 declared a war on poverty, the out-of-wedlock birth statistic was 6.3%. I'm sorry, that's the poverty statistic in this country, 6.3%. Since then, 1964, we have spent $16.7 trillion to eradicate poverty, and you see that by 2008, that figure, growth of unwed childbearing is what that graph is. I'm trying to go too fast here and messing up my numbers. The growth of unwed childbearing, 40.6%. What happened was the policy of the federal government disconnected child rearing from the institution of marriage. People were paid to have babies out of wedlock. We had to create a new word for that, call it the underclass. Children having children, not knowing anybody who had been married, and those children growing up not knowing anyone who had a job. That was the underclass. And the decline of marriage is just the flip side of that scale. In 1963, more than 93% of births were to married couples. After we have finished fighting poverty through the government, 59% of births are to married couples. Tremendous decline. This next slide is quite astonishing. It represents the conclusions of the first study of its kind released in 2008 by a number of researchers headed by the Institute for American Values, which shows that the cost per year of all government levels because of divorce and unwed children, the cost to government is $112 billion per year. That list represents all of the available federal, state, and local government programs that can be accessed by those who are divorced, those who have children out of wedlock, and the cost is just that staggering. The amount of poverty is just still staggering. Those numbers there are in the thousands. So the number on the left, 36.4 million people. That is the total number of people today who are below the poverty line, 36.4 million. Nearly 13 million of those are children. More than 1/3 under the poverty level, and children also about 1/3. It's an amazing, amazing statistic, all due to the decline of marriage. Let me hasten on here. Marriage drops the probability of child poverty by 82%.
Wow.
Unwed family, you see the large graph, the amount of poverty in those out of wedlock families dropping to 6% in an intact family, an 82% drop simply by keeping marriages intact. I want you to read down the rows on the left. That says countries with same-sex marriage, countries with only civil unions but no same-sex marriage, countries with regional recognition of same-sex marriage, and countries without same-sex marriage. And that next column of numbers represents the response of people who were asked, are married people happier? Countries with same-sex marriage, 21% say people are happier. Countries with civil unions, 36% of people say married people are happier. Countries with only regional recognition, the respect for marriage continues to go up, 42%. Countries without same-sex marriage, the respect for marriage, the happiness that people expect out of marriage goes high. This is a difficult statistic to tell you, but as the culture for same-sex marriages increases, the culture for traditional marriage declines. You wind up with the statistics we have had before: more children out of wedlock, higher rates of poverty. And the rest of those numbers indicate a similar situation in those countries in which only traditional marriage exists, as opposed to those countries that are entertaining same-sex marriages. It's a very clear set of statistics. That first column on the left, a child needs a home with both a father and a mother to grow up happy. Countries that have same-sex marriage, only 76% of people believe that, but that's actually a strong statistic. Countries with same-sex unions, but not same-sex marriage, you see the statistic holds very strong at 84%. Countries with regional recognition, 80%. Countries without same-sex marriage, 93.8% respond in the affirmative to the statement that says a child needs a home with both a father and a mother to grow up happily. You look up again at the top number on the left, countries with same-sex marriage, 76% believe that. And so you see that as a marriage culture in a country declines, the respect for marriage, the belief in its power also declines. That's why our organization continues to believe that if this country loses our marriage culture, we are headed for a lot of trouble. These slides will be available at CitizenLink.com, CitizenLink.com. Let me conclude with Ronald Reagan's statement that says, "The family has always been the cornerstone of American society. Our families nurture, preserve, and pass onto each other, onto each succeeding generation, the values we share and cherish, values that are the foundation of our freedoms." Words never more true than they are true today. Thank you very much. I'm going over to the right.
Okay. You're allowed to change positions. Greetings, everyone. What a privilege it is to be with you today. I believe we're at a momentous time, strategic time in our culture, and we can change the course of America if we so choose to move wisely and strategically. In 1953, a young black man was involved with voter registration issues and other things in a southern state, was threatened at gunpoint by a state trooper. Trooper said, "Boy, if you keep this up, I'm going to kill you." Next time, he proceeded to discharge his weapon right above that young man's ear, temporarily deafening him. The young fellow was allowed to get up off his knees. He began to go back home. As he walked, his walk ran into a run. And when he finally got back to his residence, he told his wife that they were going to leave that southern state and go to a northern state where his father had recently relocated. That young man was my father, and it began an activism kind of streak, if you will, in our family, where we've come to believe that the right to vote is an essential freedom. It's something that many have paid a price for. And I believe that what we're dealing with as we're looking at the next generation, conservatives have an opportunity to engage a multiracial, multicultural group of people who want to make a difference, but that will never happen if you throw social conservative issues under the bus. It won't happen. You may not be aware that there's a new black church. It's a black church that preaches the same old fiery messages, but the new entrepreneurs that lead this new black church, they've got a laptop and they're plugged into what's going on in the demographic world, in the political world, and they are biblically oriented and they want to make a difference today. Great place to say amen. So don't fool yourself. I'm standing here today coming from a history of Democratic Party members. I live in Maryland, or actually I'm a resident now these last 2 years in DC. My church is in Maryland. And the reality is I'm in a place where I relate to, work with the whole Democratic world, but I stand with conservative issues, and I have to, whether I like quote unquote, the GOP or not, whether I like Republicans or not, there is no other party now that really is advocating any of the social issues that are consistent with my faith. Would you agree? Great place. So, what's my point? My point is, don't miss the opportunity to bring blacks, Hispanics, and others on board. Don't miss the opportunity. Don't miss the opportunity to try to sell somebody on the whole farm before you introduce them to the front door. In other words, you ought to continue to lead the battle to protect marriage in the United States and the issues of life. You ought to do that because A, it's right, and also because it will garner and catalyze a group of people that will want to make a difference for you and with you. Am I making any sense? All right. Now, if you can believe that, I've got to tell you that the other side is saying that marriage is a civil rights issue. It is not. In our battle for marriage in D.C., Walter Fauntleroy, who was the guy who was sent by Martin Luther King Jr. to Capitol Hill to represent him, said there are only 5 major individual civil rights that they fought about and cared about, aside from the right to vote I've already talked about. It was a right to a fair income, a job that you could work. It was a right to education, a right to fair housing, and a right to essential health care, not Obamacare, don't shout me down. But Charles Drew, the guy that founded the blood plasma whole process in the United States, died in Washington, D.C. because folk would not take him to a hospital that could treat him. They had to take him around the city to a black hospital. And those kind of egregious violations were going on. But that is not the case in the issue of marriage. It is about what is going to happen to the next generation. If you change marriage, you redefine the family. You redefine the family, you redefine parenting. You redefine parenting, you must of necessity redefine education. And in that redefinition, that's where we get Heather has 2 mommies, and a generation of kids as young as 5 years old are told that they are to be gay allies in the state of California. It is absolutely about the next generation, and those who are for same-sex marriage are working strategically against your and my best interest. Don't throw us under the bus. Don't throw us under the bus. Don't push all the social issues over into the corner and say, it's just for those religious fanatics. Don't throw us under the bus. I'll say it this way, if you minimize us, then you're going to lose your opportunity. I'm convinced that if we continue in this direction, if Obamacare, all those other things that are going on, if the view of the world that our current president and his administration is allowed to continue on its trajectory, America will be damaged. There's only one thing that will stand between that happening and us successfully wresting the controls of the nation away from thoughtless hands and back in the hands of sensible people. And that is if you will stand with me and break out of previous kind of limitations and boundaries and decide that this is going to be a multicultural, multiracial movement. Oh, somebody needs to shout or clap or do something in this place. Yeah. Come on. I'm telling you, we can change America on our watch. I'm telling you, we can transform the nation. I'm telling you, it's not inevitable that marriage is messed up by the other side. I'm telling you, America can be saved. It can. America can be restored. It can. Final word. With all the discussions about civility, what a bunch of baloney. with all the discussions about civility, there is a need for those of us who consider ourselves as real conservatives need to decide that we're going to strip away the labels and the things that divide us in terms of cultures. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of black men and black children, white kids, black kids, and others working together, in fact, should be realized. And if we'll work together in unity in this hour, we'll look back at this date, and we'll look back at 2012 and decide that this was a time in which America rose up to its original dream and decided to change her destiny. Thank you very much.
I think we're going to have time for one question. And before we do, I really want to thank the remarks from the panelists. I do want to urge that, I think that this is very inspiring stuff, and I think everyone in this room shares the concern about the problems with the state of marriage today. But I would just would warn that I think that the battle is bigger than the laws that are in place now, or the laws that have fight over the status of marriage, because as Tom showed, marriage has been declining for a lot longer than the discussion, the debate over gay marriage. So I really want to challenge everyone in this room to say, that this is beyond fighting in legislatures, and I think this is really more of a person-to-person fight, and that we need to all look at ourselves and look at what we can do to promote a culture of marriage among the people that we are friends with, and the people that we are, among ourselves. Look at our own lives and really try to walk the walk, because I think it's important to talk about things like policies that affect marriage. This is really an individual, and I think a friends and families and culture thing. So anyways, I think we have time for one real quick question.
Yeah, hi. This is actually directed at Bishop Harry Jackson and Reverend Michael Faulkner. I ran for county council in 2010 in Prince George's County, and I actually attended Hope Christian Church. I was invited to attend a couple black churches in the area. And when I was there, I noticed that everyone there was very socially conservative, and there were people getting up and saying how against abortion they were and how pro-marriage, and they wanted to keep it between a union of a man and a woman as it states in the Bible. My question is when I see that in these conservative all-black churches, how does that translate through to the historically black vote that goes to the Democrat candidates in the past years, and where do we lose them?
That's a great question, and check. I'm talking. Okay. All right. That's a great question, and I'll make it brief because I know Bishop Jackson has some wants to add to that as well. We have struggled with that our entire life. 1986, meeting President Reagan, being involved in White House briefings. That was the conversation. That's what we were talking about. In a nutshell, I will say that we in this room can change that if we determine that we are going to be better. It's not our values that separate us and divide us from the Black and Latino communities. It's not our values at all. It's our message and our methods. We have got to learn. I live in New York City. I live in Harlem. I ran against Charlie Rangel. I have stood for conservative values. I have marched, I have campaigned, and people love, I don't want to say me, but I am respected in the community because people know that I am a member of that community. But I have not once compromised on those conservative principles and values. We, the people in this room, the conservative movement, have to begin to think smarter about how we share our message. I'll just say this last thing. As I campaigned, and especially in Latino churches, I was required, before the pastor would allow me to speak, to give my position on same-sex marriage and on abortion. It was required. So they are staunch conservatives, probably more conservative than we are. Our problem is we have a disconnect that we need really need to work on.